Good afternoon. It's Wednesday, the 1st of July 2015, just after 1 o'clock, and welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host this afternoon, Brian Gerrish. With me in the studio and indeed behind the technical desk is Mike Robinson. Well, what a day we've got, really, because the weather reports from across the country are pretty mixed. We've got it pretty cloudy, muggy here in Plymouth. We had thunderstorms early this morning. I think there's been a hint of thunder in Manchester. Rhyl is a bit clammy, apparently, if I understand the weather report correctly. Clammy in Rhyl. Canvey Island in Essex, it's very nice, so that's good. Yorkshire is sunny, which we understand will be particularly good for the tea growing. And it should be nice in Lambeth, London, for Melanie Shaw, so that's good. Well, what have we got for the news, Mike?
Well, apparently there's only one story today, and that is Heathrow runway. And according to the BBC, nothing else is going on.
Right, so, well, that gives us a bit of time then, because we could just leave that running. And what have you got planned for tomorrow?
I'm actually going to be in Nottingham tomorrow.
Nottingham. So there is news, well, UK Column News from Nottingham tomorrow.
Well, indeed. So I don't know why the BBC, I mean, I appreciate that for the local people this is a big issue, but on a national and international scale, and bearing in mind all the other things that are going on, it is interesting that seems to be the only thing they want to talk about.
Distract the public. So we've got Greece collapsing, we've got a corrupt criminal European Union organisation with its banks. We've got Cameron ramping up war against Russia, but the BBC thinks that the big issue is the third Heathrow runway.
Yes.
Should we just put it back on screen so that people know?
Okay, there you go. Super.
If you're living locally and that runway is going to affect you, does the UK Column care? Of course we do. What can you do about that? How can you campaign? Well, one of the things, of course, is to challenge what the government is saying about money supply at the moment. And if we understand that the British government is continually lying to the public, that will be a good start in your campaign. And of course, we've got lies locally amongst local authorities over money.
Well, it's interesting because John Hirst published this article, the Section 151 Officer, Council Tax and Fraudulent Accounting. Now, what's this about? Well, basically, the Section 151 Officer, that post was established by Section 151 of the Local Government Act 1972, and it's to do with money raised from local taxation. And really what we're saying is that is being diverted into private investment. So that was we have that, but also Expose the Establishment published it as well. And I just thought it was interesting, just to give a little bit of background on this. My own research into this goes back to the Icelandic situation, Brian, and I put freedom of information requests into every council in the country. I got maybe about 30% of them respond to that, and I was pretty staggered at the time about how much money they actually had in reserves of various types.
Stashed away.
So the example that John Hirst quotes in his article is a council that has £55.951 million in usable reserves and £302,217,000 in what they term as unusable reserves. And this, based on the freedom of information responses that I got, is a pattern that goes right across the country. And you got to say, times of austerity, what are they holding on to this for? But anyway, this article then was published in Public Finance Today. Surprisingly, a couple of weeks after John Hirst's article appears on the internet. Most council cash earmarked, and this is according to a survey. This is a CIPFA survey, and this is a poll which asked local authority finance chiefs, according to this article, to identify what financial reserves they held and the extent to which they were earmarked for specific purposes. So what they're basically trying to do here is justify the fact that they have so much money in reserves. And what these guys are saying is that £2.3 billion had been set aside for schools and public health projects, a further £13.8 billion for known or predicted spending requirements, and £3.7 billion, which is 16%, held in general reserves and local authority accounts across the UK. But basically, the amounts of money here are huge, billions and billions of pounds right across the country, and they're not being used for any productive purposes. They're sitting in accounts in the financial system at a time of financial instability. And as we know from what happened the last time there was a financial crisis, they lost a lot of that. through the Icelandic banks. So I mean, we don't have financial crisis at the moment, do we?
I haven't got past the runway, actually.
Right.
Apparently Heathrow runway is the most important news by the BBC. Never mind the fact that we've got billions of pounds of money hidden from the public via local authorities. And the same pattern is going on across Britain's police forces, because we know that the average reserves for each of the police districts is about £60 million. So we have the police publicly saying, well, we just do not have enough money to police the streets properly. We've got to cut back. We've got to privatise. We've got to amalgamate police forces in order to save money. But the reality is that billions are there available if we total up all of these reserve sums. So it's, in my opinion, it's absolute deceit on the public that this money exists. We're in a state of supposed crisis over money to be spent for needs, whether it's homeless people and accommodation or it's feeding people. And they're saying, well, no, we can't actually spend this money. It's unusable.
It's unusable. It's reserved. If just bring that up again. Sitfa here, their chief executive in this article, says the government rightly proclaims the benefits of having a long-term economic plan for its own finances. Local authorities know that using reserves to provide for future services, protect against risks and manage the transformation of services is the right way to manage their finances in the long-term interests of communities and country.
Well, that's the word, isn't it? Because the transformation, of course, is the privatisation, is placing all of this public infrastructure under the control of the global company. So this is the big scam. We need to keep digging on this. John Hirst has done some particularly good work. If you're interested in this, and if there's anybody out there with formal accountancy qualifications, particularly if you've worked as a 151 officer or you've worked as an accountant within a local authority, we would love to hear from you, particularly if you're able to do some deep research.
Now, the John's article on the UK column is currently in an unpublished state while I make a couple of adjustments, and one of the adjustments that I'm going to make is I'm going to attach a zip file with all the Freedom of Information responses that I got from all the councils. This was in 2008. So if anybody wants to download that zip file and do some more research on this, then it is going to be available for you to do that.
Right. Well, that's excellent.
Just within 5 minutes after the news programme's finished, I should say. So
okay.
Yeah.
That is excellent, and of course it ties in with what we've been trying to do with the new website, which is to make it a tool so that people who want to do things instead of just watch as events unfold can actually get that information and start to act on it. Well, can we thank all of the people who've contacted us as a result of our special news yesterday, where we talked about Melanie Shaw. And it's quite apparent from the tone of the emails that we've had back that many people found that a deeply moving 15-16 minute interview with Melanie Shaw. And I've got to say, it takes immense courage for somebody who has suffered so much over so many years to actually sit in front of a live recording camera to speak to the public. So I know that many of you picked up on that, how difficult it was for her to do that. But let's just remind ourselves as to what has actually been going on, that when somebody has been brave enough to come forward and speak out about their own abuse as a child, not only within their family, not only within a foster family, but then compounded by the authorities which say they're there to protect children, also facilitating her abuse. And what happens when she speaks out? She's utterly brutalised and harassed, not only by Nottinghamshire police, but of course the local authorities as well. And we're going to add a bit more to the story, but for those of you who haven't seen it, just let's have a look at what appeared yesterday on UK Column website. If you go on there and look for the photo of Melanie Shaw, you can see our special report. A glimpse into institutionalised child abuse, and should be able to bring up a clip here of Melanie in the studio, and we know that that was a very difficult session for her. The truth is that ever since this lady has come forward, She has been bullied, harassed, and victimised. But what we also know is, of course, that Melanie is now in the clutches of Nottingham MAPA, the Multi-Agency Public Protection Arrangement System, which the UK column has warned about as being an extremely dangerous system where the police and others meet behind closed doors, in this case to discuss Melanie and their plans to control her. There are no minutes, and of course Melanie is barred from knowing what she's accused of and who's actually accused her. This is absolutely Stasi. This is a complete breakdown of freedoms and common law, and this is not something that's proposed. This is now a system that's being put in place across the country, where it is not even a court. As we will show, a number of agencies are involved. Very, very dangerous stuff.
Why does the public need to be protected from Melanie?
Well, this is a key question, of course, because Melanie is not a threat to the public. She is the one who has suffered, and I'll bring that up. I'll bring that up on screen as we work through MAPA here. So this is an old front page from Nottinghamshire MAPA. Here we are, Multi-Agency Public Protection Arrangements. I was intrigued by the image there because we have these rather threatening figures circled around what appears to be the little blue figure. So you rather get the impression that these big threatening figures are oppressing that little blue figure. I don't think this is accidental. You can find this document online without any trouble at all. I encourage you to download it and read it. It says here, what is MAPA? MAPA are a set of arrangements to manage the risk posed by certain sexual and violent offenders. They bring together the police, probation and prison services in Nottinghamshire into what is known as the MAPA Responsible Authority. Now, that opening paragraph is itself a lie, but of course your point is there, Mike, because Melanie Shaw is a victim. She has suffered unbelievable abuse within the so-called protective children's services, and yet here she is now being the focus of MAPA. How does it work? Well, they say that offenders eligible, it's almost as like it's a prize, you qualify. Offenders eligible for MAPA are identified and information is gathered, shared about them across relevant agencies. The nature and level of the risk of harm they pose is assessed, and a risk management plan is implemented to protect the public. And I anticipated the question because Melanie Shaw is not a sexual or violent offender. She's a child abuse victim. So this is a complete inversion of what common law is about, a complete inversion. And those districts are across UK. I've forgotten how many they are, but I believe that there's about 63 of them. So if you think you're living in an area of the country where this hidden system is working, it doesn't apply to you, I'm afraid to say it absolutely does. So remember that first paragraph, because Nottinghamshire MAPA said, well, it's just the police and the probation service, really. Well, absolute lie. Let's have a look at their own words. Here are the agencies which make up the MAPA Strategic Management Board. So we've got Nottinghamshire Probation Trust, we've got the police, we've got the prison governor, we've got Probation Trust, we've got 2 lay advisors, heads of service, Nottinghamshire Youth Offending Teams, Job Centre. Oh, well, so if you're going to try and get a job and improve your life, they're working against you behind closed doors. Here we've got Head of Children's Services. So the very people who failed Melanie now sit in judgment of her behind closed doors with MAPA. Safeguarding and Independent Review, Children and Young People's Services. That, of course, is another partnership with the police. Children's Social Care. NHS, so Melanie can't go near a hospital without what she needs being reported back to this vicious group of people. We've got Commissioning Manager, Offenders Health. Did Melanie receive any help for her own health needs? None at all. And let's just bring up here, of course, that the meeting is behind closed doors and Melanie, as the accused, has no right of reply. And in case you think we've missed it, well, we absolutely haven't. Melanie can't attend these meetings, but a private corporation, G4S, making profit on the backs of the police, as just one example, is able to sit in here.
That's the same G4S that, along with Serco, were monitoring dead people with electronic tags, wasn't it?
Absolutely.
Yes, so these people that have been demonstrated to be utterly corrupt, stealing taxpayers' money as a result of putting in fraudulent invoices on, for exactly this area of electronic monitoring, are now taking part in MAPA meetings.
Indeed. So I see from some of the comments that people are actually picking up on what this means. As I say, these are not proposed plans. This is reality. If it's happening to Melanie Shaw, it's happening for thousands of other people across the country. This is a system which Stasi Germany would have welcomed with open hands, because, of course, the speed at which modern databases and electronic communication can work mean that this is a spying system on the individual like no other. Very, very dangerous. And in a few minutes, we're going to talk about how that interfaces with the named person scheme in Scotland. Mike.
Okay, so let's just highlight upcoming events. Events are published on the community section of the UK Column website now. If you look on the front page of that, you'll find upcoming events. And of course, I want to highlight two, which is the emergency budget. Justin Walker wants to get as many people as possible to help support the Bradbury Pound outside Parliament on the 8th of July, which is next Wednesday, I believe, when George Osborne gives his so-called emergency budget for cutting back money that he claims he doesn't have. So we're going to be distributing leaflets on the Bradbury, talking to people about the Bradbury Pound and trying to encourage people to get behind that policy. And the other one that I want to highlight here is the No More Social Services Cover-Ups event, which is happening outside the Midland Hotel in Manchester. That's also on the 8th, so if you can't get down to London, maybe you can get to Manchester instead. And this is basically a group of people led by Mickey Summers and others protesting outside the Midland Hotel, where there is a Chatham House plenary session taking place to discuss social services and so on, and they want to make sure that no more cover-ups happen, so get along to that if you can.
Could we put out a plea for anybody who attends these sorts of events in London or elsewhere, if you can email us photos. Usually the quality of a photo from a mobile phone is absolutely fine, or can you give us live video stream or recorded video? If you can provide that sort of information, we are very happy to actually get it up on screen. And if anybody thinks that we haven't really commented on the child abuse protest that took place in London, we are going to do that. We are paying attention to the videos, particularly the very powerful one talking about David Cameron's government. So we are coming to that. Just please be patient. It's been a pretty busy few days.
Just to mention before we move on, anybody that is a UK Column member can post upcoming events. Please do make sure that if not everybody's, I mean, people are walking away from Facebook, but if you are publishing only on Facebook, then we can't necessarily watch everybody's Facebook pages. So please make sure it's on here, so that then we can help promote your events.
Okay. Right, well, let's return to the subject of the state spying on us. It's loosely called the nanny state, but of course this is a gross underestimate of how dangerous the state control has now become in Britain. And let's just have a look at this headline from north of the border. It's the Herald Scotland: confusion over plans to appoint named person for every child in Scotland. Now, this is in a way a misleading headline, because if you read the article, what they're actually saying is that basically there's confusion in the public sector, because although the government has stated that this named person scheme is coming into being, the public authorities themselves don't fully understand it. If we sidestep that and get to the meat of it, we've got the same Scottish government which covered up the abuse of Holly Greig and other youngsters, is now to take direct control of the protection of all Scottish children. So the named person will be responsible from the time of conception until the child is an adult and can be put to work. So I'll just bring in some of the text here. The proposals contained in the Children and Young People Scotland Act aim to give everyone under 18 a named person, usually a teacher or health visitor, to oversee them from August next year. He or she would be a contact point if welfare issues needed to be raised with police or social services. Now, think about that in the context of what's happening with Melanie, and also remember that Scottish politicians have said on public record, well, don't worry about this because parents may also have a role. May. So where does this lead us? Well, thank you very much to the viewer who sent us this. It's an article we think has come from the Western Morning News. Parents warned on children staying away from home. Now, this is a fascinating little article buried away in the paper. We've captioned it, Devon County Council threaten parents to back business for adoption agencies. So we're going to pull this article apart. And of course, the first thing we should note is that what is a local council doing? It is warning parents. It's threatening them that they better do something, otherwise they will be in trouble. Same council, presumably, Mike, that's sitting on a few £1 million of money. So here they are, parents in the West Country who send their children to stay with friends or distant relatives for more than 4 weeks must tell the authorities, officials have warned today. Now, I don't know the date of the report. That doesn't matter. So we've got Jane McInnes, Devon County Council's Cabinet Member for Children, Schools and Skills, said, we want to make sure the best possible arrangements have been made for the child and that they are safe, being well looked after and continuing with their education. And he goes on to say, we can make arrangements to visit the child and private foster carers. Sorry, I've lost my place. Private foster carers regularly and make sure that the child's racial, cultural, linguistic and religious needs are being met. So this is really quite amazing stuff. As a parent, you can't do it, but trust the council to actually look after the religious needs of your child. Now, let's say you're a Muslim, I don't believe that Devon County Council's actually made a declaration that they're going to help protect Islam. I don't believe they've done the same for Christianity, and yet we are to trust these unknown people to look after our children's welfare. So the inference from that article, very clear. It agrees with the named person scheme in Scotland that as a parent you're not really capable of making decisions about your children and the council's going to do it for you.
Well, this comes down to the whole issue of ownership of children, doesn't it?
Oh, well, the government owns the children. And of course, what did Hitler say? Hitler said the state owned the children, and he was not worried about the future because if the Nazi state owned the children, they owned the future. Well, let's go back and follow it through, because if we jump down to the end, we start to get a clue for what's going on. It says the County Council's announcement came ahead of Private Fostering Week, which begins on the 7th of July. Now, we spoke to the council this morning and said, what was all this based on? And they said the Children's Act 1989 and the Private Fostering Regulations 2005. They couldn't give us any more detail. But let's just see where this heads. So Private Fostering Week, what is that? Well, it led us to this organisation, or this website at least, Somebody Else's Child. And this is all about private fostering, the need for private fostering. And here we find the Private Fostering Week mentioned. So what do you think, Mike, a Private Fostering Week would be about?
Well, it's about turning children into a commodity which can be farmed out to private companies, little small businesses that are running in households that happen to have a couple of spare rooms. Maybe it's related to the bedroom tax or something. You need to fill a bedroom, become a private fosterer or something.
Earn some money.
Earn some money, yeah.
Well, I'm going to say absolutely spot on. I mean, the average member of the public might think that Private Fostering Week is about fostering. But what is it about? Well, here we are, about the week, and they tell us pretty quickly. The aim of somebody else's child is to change behaviour. It's not about the children, it's to change behaviour, to ensure that these children are being well cared for. It's a legal requirement that parents and carers notify their local authority. And then it goes on to say there's an estimated 10,000 children living in private fostering arrangements. But really what it's about is how to get people spying on each other. So here we are, we can download their own publication. Do you know a child being privately fostered? Sometimes it can be hard to tell whether you're a neighbour, teacher, nurse or anyone else who has contact with children. There are some signs. And if you want to find out what those signs are, they don't actually tell you on the website. You have to download the document, which I asked for but I haven't received. So what is the behaviour change? It's not to do with the children, it's about spying, getting people to spy on each other.
And the whole issue, the whole threat of parents, if you're sending your child away, this is more identification of individuals who might be eligible for private fostering, perhaps.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. They say that, of course, if your child goes to stay with a near relative, there's no problem. It's only if the relative is distant or a friend. But of course, who makes the decision that the distant relative is the right relative or the friend is the right person? The parents do. Well, what Devon County Council is saying very strongly is, I'm sorry parents, you no longer have control of your children. Trust Devon County Council Social Services. Well, where can we go now? It gets better. So we've popped back to that website page for somebody else's child. There was the Private Fostering Week. But let's have a little glimpse down here, because we've got the British Association of Adoption and Fostering. So an organisation, albeit a charity, that makes its money out of adoption and fostering, has just put up all of the glossy advertising for Fostering and Adoption Week. It seems to be advertising itself, really, Mike.
Yeah.
So we dug a bit deeper. Here's BAAF. And their media centre had got some interesting things to say, because we picked up that they'd been doing research into young people which had revealed alarming numbers of invisible children and their anxieties. That's an interesting expression, isn't it? The children are invisible, but they've located them. How did they locate them? Well, we get a clue in the notes for editors, because if we have a look in the middle of it, they tell us something interesting. The research was conducted by Jubit. Jubit is a specialist youth research agency, and it was conducted online with a nationally representative panel of 1,021 young people aged 9 to 16. So all of a sudden, we are able to get in amongst 9-year-olds to actually find out what they got to say. Well, who's Jubit? Well, it's just fascinating. Here they are. What are they a specialist in? Strategy, research and digital things for kids' entertainment brands. So this company is very keen in locating children because they can then work with big players to sell devices to the children. And here we've got very young children fixed up with, what do we call this stuff? It's virtual reality.
Are they doing research into the effects of this on children? Are they using children as lab rats for their product and their marketing?
Well, that's a pretty good description, Mike. I found this unbelievably creepy. If you go to their website and have a look at the pictures of the children with the full facial masks on, they do actually look like lab rats. And then we see, who does this company work with? Well, very big players. They're in with Kellogg's. They're in with major people trying to make money out of children, including the BBC, of course. So all of a sudden, we're getting I think, a little bit of an interesting picture here. Is this to do with looking after children, or is it to do with locating children in order to make money from them? Well, we didn't get an answer from Devon County Council this morning. We spoke to a very nice lady. She did get a little bit nervous after she told us about the Children's Act. We're going to stay on the case and see if Devon County Council team actually knows that they're helping to promote children's video games. Now, the company itself, to be fair to them, well, roughly fair to them, we've got some open publicity here. We've got one of their executives has been boasting that, if we just ring fence this, it's Dubit's head of online research service, Jonathan Clough, has said we're finding agencies and brands need the ability to access young people with one or two questions, either to test them, help support pitches, or generate that elusive headline for their client. So he seems to be pretty keen to find children because they know they can make money out of children. And we're not the only people watching this organisation, because some of the mainstream press a while ago flagged up that they didn't really like what they were doing. But promoted, it would appear, by Devon County Council. So if we just pop a bit of this back together, here's somebody else's child. On the site is a button. It says it's to notice your local council. When you click on it, I can call up Devon County Council, of course, and it says click the next bit to go and read the details for Devon County Council. Well, I did that, but then I got a warning notice saying, sorry, this link doesn't work. So does Devon County Council really know what they're doing, or is this actually collaboration to make money from children?
Well, we have suggested for quite some time that the whole legal system, adoption system, fostering system, and now we're seeing a corporate interest as well. And of course, let's not forget the charity sector is a huge money-making exercise out of children.
Yeah. So get the children away from their parents, and then of course all of these agencies can literally prey on the children to make money or possibly abuse them, as we've seen with the testimony of Melanie Shaw. Money, love of money, root of all evil.
Indeed. So let's talk about it. Greece has become the first developed nation to default on its international obligations. That's the message that everybody wants to promote. And of course, those international obligations were to the International Monetary Fund. So all the mainstream media, unfortunately, including RT, really suggesting that Greece has now joined the likes of Zimbabwe and Somalia and so on in defaulting against the IMF. I think that should be a badge of honour, not something criticism to be ashamed of. Yeah. But the Financial Times broke the story this morning that Tsipras is back down on the Greek bailout demands. And this is what they were promoting very, very hard, that all the mainstream media got on this bandwagon. Tsipras accepts austerity terms. In fact, it's not quite the case. The Financial Times published the letter that Tsipras had sent, which was another attempt to make a deal with the European Union, the IMF, and the European Central Bank. And what he's basically played a clever game here, because what he is clearly attempting to do is to get the European authorities to refuse to accept this latest so-called opportunity to negotiate. And indeed, that seems to be what they've happened, because the German finance minister has said that this new letter offers no basis for talking about any serious measures to solve the problem. Merkel is saying there'll be no discussion before the referendum. The EU is hoping that the referendum on Sunday is going to produce a yes vote, and that they will then be free to do what they choose to do to Greece after that.
Asset strip it.
Completely. But Tsipras has sent this letter. It's being played up in the press as being a capitulation, and indeed the markets have gone haywire as a result. But I think he's played a clever game here, because he's trying to get the European Union to appear to be the bad guy, which of course they are. And the Bank of England warning that the Greek crisis could trigger broader market problems. And you know, there is a phrase which involves Sherlock Holmes, which should come to people's minds at this point, because that's a pretty obvious statement. Not really much more to say about on this issue. other than they continue to play games. Greece is not at this point really making any serious moves to capitulate, and we'll see what happens on Sunday.
Well, it's hard to imagine how Greek society could become subservient to Merkel and the Germans, but we'll wait and see what their decision is. Well, we'll end on the note. If you haven't visited UK Column's new website, thanks to Mike's efforts over the last few months, please do. If you like what we're doing, please consider taking out a subscription or a donation. We can only do what we do with your help, and where we can, we do try and help others on the basis of that. So please give that some consideration. I'm going to say a particular thank you to the people who've recently made donations for Melanie. So John, I'm going to give you a personal mention, and Denise, but there are several other people who've made some very kind donations. Those go straight into the hand of Melanie Shaw, and it's only by your help over the last, well, okay, she's been in prison for 6 months, but on both occasions when she was out of prison, she could only really survive with your help. So thank you very much for doing that. What else have we got to say?
I think we're done for today.
I think we're done. That's it. So if you haven't caught the BBC News, don't bother watching it, because it will simply be about the runway. And I was shocked actually to hear from somebody where I live that they are still watching BBC. Pretty sad. There we go. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back 1 o'clock tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.